Pacts. Pacts are 2 or more sided agreements that we make with a deep soul conviction. We're going to look at pacts, but I'm breaking it up into 2 different types depending on who the pact is with. Pacts with positive souls. This type of pact is a 2 or more sided agreement with 2 or more positive souls that is a deep soul agreement. When it scans up in this reading, it's because it's out of alignment for the people and creating a negative impact for the person you're reading for. An example of this type of pact is when soul friends make a pact never to leave each other while 15 years old, and when they turn 21 and trying to move on to create a life away from each other due to different dreams, they could find all kinds of situations, issues, problems, etc., actually moving away from each other and have no idea why all those things are happening. So this particular type of pact, pacts between 2 positive souls, and the example that I just used is, imagine at 15, you and your absolute best mate, make a pact never to leave each other. You're so determined that you're going to be best friends forever and you're always going to be with each other. At 15, you make that complete pact. It's so deep, you're never going to leave each other. And then say at 21, you both decide to go in opposite directions because you both want to go to different universities, or one wants to travel and one wants to go to uni. And, it's very normal and common at that age to start drifting away and doing different things. Now, if that pact was, and I'm talking about like a really deep pact, not just like, oh yeah, we're going to be together forever. Just like 2 friends that need each other so much and they make that pact never to leave each other. At 21, when they decide to go their own separate ways and start their lives, all this stuff could start playing out and drama could happen, and they might not get into uni, or they might not have the finances to travel, or all this stuff could be blocking them because that pact is in place. It is absolutely mind-blowing, the stuff that I've seen happen because of things like pacts. And you just think, wow, really? But that is the reason why we have to be impeccable with our words, the promises we make and things like that. It's really important because words hold power, and it's really important to know that promises that we make can last for lifetimes. They have to be charged with the right emotion. You can't just say, oh yeah, I promise, like I said, using the word yeah, I promise. It's not the word, it's the emotion and the deep level of conviction, soul level conviction. If you are completely dedicated to the pact or promise you're making, that is going to stamp itself in time. So these types of things can actually make other stuff show up. And I mean, who would ever know that at 21? That the person that came to me with this scenario going on, she was just wondering why the hell she couldn't make, her dreams come true of traveling. So when we found the energetic root cause was a pact, and then she was like, oh my God, but her and her friend went through some trauma together, and they both were going through family, full-on family trauma as teenagers together. So they were like best friends, and they were like wound buddies. So that pact was deep for them. They believed that they only had each other and they were never going to leave each other. And at 15, they thought they were going to live with each other forever. So at 21, when life changed for them, that pact was still creating a lot of influence and impacting their life and causing them to not be able to actually move too far away from each other. So it can be very interesting and intricate how these types of things can play out. So be very careful with what you promise and with what you commit to. Another example is a pact between 2 lovers to never be with anybody else ever, and then they break up and move on years down the track. If this pact was made with a very deep soul commitment, then they could find themselves unable to find another lover or partner until the pact is dissolved. I had a client who'd been single for 25 years with not even one lover in that time, and she'd made a very deep soul pact to a guy she was dating at the time, went on ecstasy when she was 23. Pacts while made on drugs seem to be deeply lasting, as it's made with such highlighted emotional charge. So this is particularly interesting. I find that when I come across people that have got lots of stuff going on, and then I find that a pact is, one of the energetic root causes, it's so interesting how it you can see how it all played out. So the example I used was a woman who, around the age of 25 was dating a guy that she used to, see and go out with and take drugs with at parties and blah, blah, blah. And she was really into him and fully thought that she loved him at that stage. And they both made a pact to not be with anybody else, that they were going to be with each other forever. And this was on ecstasy. They both felt like that was it. So they made this pact while on ecstasy, and that pact was so deeply, because they were really highlighted. Ecstasy can make you feel love like you've never felt before. So under that particular influence of drugs, this pact was deep. So can you imagine not having a partner for 25 years? Like, not even one lover in that time. Now, I don't know what happened to him because I haven't read for him. She doesn't, I only read for her. So I don't know what happened on his side of the fence. But on her side of the fence, that pact was so deep that in 25 years, she did not have even one other person in her life. Can you even fathom that? So, pacts can be very, very deep. Now, that was an unusual case, but if you're working with clients who do take drugs and do actually party on ecstasy and those types of drugs that actually highlight love and can make you feel like you're more connected to someone than you actually really are, then you may come across these types of pacts, and you might just come across situations like I just explained. Now, very uncommon to have someone 25 years later, because, this lady is now in her 50s, but, and when I was blown away that 25 years ago that she was even experimenting with drugs, but then she said to me, it was actually back then it was more easier to do, and it was more kind of, in her circle of friends, it was very much, kind of common. So who knows where it's going to show up? Who knows how many people are affected by making pacts on drugs? I don't know, but I find it very, very interesting, and you may just come across it. Pacts with negative forces. These pacts are 2 or more sided agreements made with negative incarnated souls, negative forces, negative entities, and negative beings for personal gain, especially with the Changeling Collective, who we're going to be talking about later. Usually the person will have to give up something, such as an important keys and codes, DNA, information, or they sometimes agree to change some of their information to align with darker agenda in order to inject fake information into the collective. They do this for exchange for assistance in gaining abundance, power, love, etc. Usually I find most people make pacts in ignorance of the consequences and don't really realize that once these negative forces have got a grip on them, they don't relinquish their claim on you very easily. Now, these types of pacts, I'm not going to say, you're going to find a lot, but you may find them and you might come across them depending on who your clients are. It might be something that you find a little bit more common than somebody else. But these types of pacts are interesting because when you make a pact with the negative forces, so entities, negative beings, whatever, when you're making pacts with negative forces, it's quite an intricate contract, because these types of pacts are made usually on an unconscious level. Because if negative energies are trying to make a pact with someone, there's a seduction that happens. They try and seduce the person into that pact. So it can play out in different ways, but there is an exchange. There's always an exchange for a pact with negative forces. So the person might be an influencer, and that influencer might be putting out content, and then they might unconsciously make a pact with an entity or negative, dark forces to then become more famous and have more abundance in order for them to give parts of their DNA or to hand over some certain keys and codes, or maybe it's to basically let that entity in so they can channel some of that information and disrupt the collective consciousness by putting disrupted keys and codes out there. So sometimes the pact is, I'll let this entity talk through me and I'll channel this entity's information, this negative entity's information, and I'll put that out there because, the person might have already built up, some following. Then if that person's an easier target for entities or negative forces to kind of manipulate, they could actually end up making a trade, basically, that they will become more famous and have more abundance for letting this entity kind of put information out through them. So these kinds of pacts usually come with some sort of big trade, like some sort of payoff for the person. It's usually in fame or fortune is usually what I see. Sometimes a person can make a pact in order to gain, to become better looking. And I know that sounds bizarre if that concept's stranger to you, but this is all an illusion. These are all just keys and codes that actually, then project this body. This is all very pliable, really. People can change their looks just on their emotional state. Someone can look a lot more, can look really different when they're really, really high and in love compared to what they look like when they're depressed. So even our vibrational state can make our appearance change. So changing your appearance can be actually very easy if you know how to, work with energy. So there's a lot of negative forces that are able to, change appearances. So sometimes that can be the payoff too. The person might become better looking over time as they're doing whatever they're doing to trade with that negative force. So these types of pacts can be, all play out in all different ways. And it never surprises me how, what different things can play out in somebody. So these types of things, like I said, if you find in a pact in a client that's made with negative forces, then there's usually a payoff there. There's a payoff the person's getting in order to exchange whatever for that pact to happen. So, don't be surprised if you do come across it, but just also be aware that the person is not consciously making this pact. When it comes to negative forces, these pacts are made, kind of either in our dream state or in a very seductive, unconscious manner. So it's very important to be very aware of what kind of energy is kind of trying to seduce you. And that's the reason why it's so important to know how to find out what you are actually, channeling and talking to, because a lot of the time they're, fake light beings pretending to be, light beings. Attaching mechanism. The attaching mechanism when it comes to pacts with positive souls. The attaching mechanism is making the pact, and the deeper the intention and commitment, the deeper the pact. Positive pacts that are in alignment with the person will not scan up. Only negative pacts that are not in the person's highest good and is creating some kind of vibrational issue will scan up. These pacts are usually verbal and both agree to it consciously. Attaching mechanism when it comes to pacts with negative forces. The attaching mechanism is making the pact for some kind of exchange. The issue is not always a fully conscious pact, like a pact with a positive soul. Sometimes they are made while asleep. Some are made from making out of alignment choices, or by signing a contract that has webbed weaving words that has a pact hidden in the undertone of the contract. Through making the pact while on drugs and seduced by negative forces, etc. They can be made in many different ways. So pacts made with positive souls are normally conscious. I won't say they're always conscious, but they normally are a conscious, pact. Pacts with negative beings are normally not conscious. They're normally made while we're asleep, or we're signing some contract that has web weaving words. If the company is ran by negative forces, some contracts can have web weaving pacts kind of underlaid into the contract. So sometimes pacts can be made that way, but normally I find it's more of an unconscious pact when it comes to negative forces. So the attaching mechanism is very hard to kind of say. Sometimes just making an out of alignment choice can be enough to create a pact with a negative being. But for people who are conscious and aware and feel into themselves and make choices based off consciousness, it's very it's much more uncommon to find those types of pacts with negative forces. I find negative pacts with negative forces are usually made from people who are very, very asleep and very unconscious normally. The results in a person. It depends on the pact, but as I explained earlier, they can have different impacts depending who the pact is with and what exchange they have made, if to negative forces. So the results will be very different each time. Lifespan. Pacts can last for lifetimes and can hide, so you will only find it if it's highlighted at the time of reading. If it's not highlighted, it means it's not having a massive impact on the person at the time of reading, but they definitely can hide, and they can be for lifetimes. So pacts can hide for lifetimes. You're only going to find them if they're highlighted at the time of reading and impacting the person at the time of reading. So otherwise, they definitely can hide.